So I'm Tony Ricci, faculty here. I've been here since 2006, I guess, so it's been a while. And I just thought I'd take a second before we get going to kind of talk about what motivates the discussion, at least for me, today. And I will say first is, I think our department is unique in that research at all levels is really an integral part of who we are. And when I first got here, we'd have a faculty meeting and there were empty seats at the table because it was such a small group of people. I used to joke that I was the only person in the department, a faculty member in the department that didn't have a title, because there was like division chiefs and chair and whatnot. Everybody had a title and I was the outlier. And now look, I mean, the department is probably 4 or 5 times the size. And I think that is important and great that the department is growing, but also then there becomes additional needs for building pathways of communication between divisions, and research division is one of the divisions within the department. And I think we have that, and the question is, how do we maintain it, how do we grow it, given how the department is changing. I think the number of job descriptions of people in the department is huge now, right? Just thinking about from a basic scientist, 100% effort, to a clinician, 100% effort, and then there's, clinician scientists going at every level. So I think everyone is, the other point I guess I'd make is I think everyone is here because they want to be here, because they choose to be at Stanford and they choose to be in this department. Everyone has different reasons for doing that, but I think we see each other as, I think the people are probably one of the main reasons that we all choose to be here. And so learning how to better take advantage of the strengths of each of us that we bring to the table is also really, I think, important and something worth discussing. So the way, I guess the other point, I noticed for me at Research Day, which is also, I think, reflects the department, how much it's grown. But I also realized how many people I don't know in the department and how much work and research is going on that I had no idea about. And I'm supposed to be part of the leadership of research, so I felt kind of bad about that. It's just like, how does this happen? And so I thought, well, we need to work on building the communication again. And it's hard to do with everyone being, going in 100 directions at once. And the last thing I'll say is, I'm not going to say where, but I did a grand rounds last week. Firstly, there were I think 7 people came to it. And I did a science talk. I talked about aminoglycoside ototoxicity, and because I see that as a really good tool for talking about how basic science leads into and can support translational and clinical work. And it was largely crickets. It was really, I sat in my office and talked to myself for an hour, and there was no feedback, and and even when I asked people questions, I was like, well, I need input for what is the way, for example, to get clinicians to try a different approach, right? How do you say, here's a new compound, and this is better than the compound you're using, and the data is there. How do you get people motivated to implement that? And no one gave me an answer. So the conversation, it was okay, because we ended up talking about baseball, but which I'm always willing to do. So anyway, so the first bit here is we're just going to have some people talk about who they are and what motivates them, being in the department. And then we were going to move into talking, if I don't know if you all have questions for us, but some of the questions were how do you see us better integrating research with clinical practice? That's kind of the goals. So I'm going to have Nate can go start.
Sure. So I'm Nate Redeker-Flynn. I'm an assistant professor in the department, opened my lab about a little less than a year and a half ago. We're a tumor immunology group. I did my postdoc here as well. I guess I'd echo some of what Tony said. So when I was entertaining different jobs on the faculty market, I kind of took a look in the mirror to try to decide who I wanted to be as a and what kind of lab I wanted to run. And I was looking at, offers from places with no medical schools and like bioengineering departments all the way to clinical departments and places with big medical schools, places that don't have undergraduate research or do. And I thought a lot about it, and I think the thing that attracted me ultimately to this department in Stanford was really that it is a place that has exceptional basic science, great engineering, but also the integration with like a true medical department and true medical school. And I think, in talking with a lot of the clinicians, I kind of asked myself what kind of research I wanted to do. And I thought I did want to do stuff that really leveraged a lot of interactions with physicians and physician scientists. And so there were other places where I was like, I'll basically be cranking out 100 of these very engineering papers, and that's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do stuff that was integrated with the clinic. And I think it's been good so far, but to Tony's point, I think there could be a lot more that we stand to learn from just an operational standpoint of what goes on in the clinics, and also like really how to integrate some of the science. We work a lot in mice, but some of the science that we're doing there, especially on the translational side, and how does that work? How do we take some finding or some therapy that we're developing? What are the nuts and bolts of getting a clinician to adopt it and those kinds of things? So maybe I'll just leave it at that. But that was really my main motivation for joining this department and the kind of work that we do.
I'm Teresa Nicholson, and I came here almost 6 years ago from OHSU, the Hearing Research Center. And that was, it was affiliated with the ENT department there, but it was independent. And in fact, the ENT department didn't really support them financially in any way. It was the university that supported them. And for many years, this center was touted as like, oh, here's a successful center. This is how things should be done. And it was great. But then the OHSU became interested in other things. There was the cancer center and things like that. And it just, over time, it just became really apparent that they weren't so interested in supporting it. And I felt like I was seeing, a fruit withering on the vine. And I saw the writing on the wall, and I thought, I should leave. And I had been there for 15 years, and it was sad to see such a successful center kind of go down that path. And they did not invest in a new director, and the last person that was hired was like over 7 years ago. So I came here, and the main reason why I came here was for a change, but also because this group of research scientists is so unusual across the entire country. There just isn't this kind of a group like this with such a focus on research on sensory hair cells, how they work, regeneration, and so on. And I was just really attracted to that because I knew that I would have so much overlapping interests with the people that were here. And that this research division is so well integrated with this department was something new to me, because the ENT department at OHSU, there was hardly any, you're saying, oh, there's a problem with communication. Well, it was far worse there. I hardly interacted with any of the MDs or clinician scientists because we didn't have something like a research day. We didn't have joint faculty meetings. And these kind of things were just, so it was, I find that it's a much better situation here. And I was hoping that, you know, we're working on the genetics of hearing loss and vestibular dysfunction in zebrafish as an animal model. And I was hoping that there were people here that were also interested in the genetics of hearing loss and maybe had access to patients, and that maybe we could make some connections like, hey, I found this mutation in this novel gene. Is this a novel gene that you're seeing in your patients that might be mutated? And this hasn't really panned out, but you know, I think that perhaps we should hire more geneticists. I don't know, but this was, you know, something that I had hoped where there would be crosstalk. And that's, I think, the topic here is how can we develop more crosstalk between researchers and clinicians and clinician scientists. So I'll leave it there.
You want to go?
Sure. I'm Alan Chang. I think I've worked with most of you on the pediatric otolaryngology side, but I actually spent half of my time in the lab. I feel old. I came here 17 years ago. And I trained in University of Washington, so the way things were set up there was clinicians and researchers were really working side by side in the Bloedel Hearing Research Center. So I think as I've told many of you, when I was looking for a faculty position, that's what I was looking for. You know, clinicians really working alongside researchers. And when I was looking, there weren't, even if you look now, there aren't too many departments that really have that culture. Now at the time, it was just Tony and Stefan and Rob who told me this is their vision. So I thought, great, let's take a chance, and there's a lot to be built. And you can see that, I mean, Tony and I have been collaborating for many years, so I thought there was something that I really needed as a junior faculty and still appreciate now. And now Teresa and Nate, that we can just talk about research day to day. And I thought that was really the culture that is unique, that we've been intentional about building. You know, whether this is having research day, but now even research trainee retreat, that the trainees get to present alongside, you know, clinical and research trainees. And even when we have a training grant, that I feel like this clinicians collaborating with researchers, not just on the research projects, that's kind of the basic minimum, but the crosstalk and then co-mentoring the next generation of trainees, that is something that's, you know, is very unique that we have, and I was very proud that we're part of that. And that's exactly what I went through before, that I thought that was so important for me to have in order to succeed. So that's where I started, and that's what we've been doing for the last 17 years.
Do you want to say anything? Do you want to introduce? I know, I caught you off guard. I'm the panel is whoever showed up.
I've been here for a little less than Alan, 16 and a half years. I was at WashU prior to that. I think the advantage of having basic scientists working alongside clinician scientists in the department, as opposed to basic scientists in the basic science department, is that the potential for direct impact is a lot greater. I mean, you can see a path to impact that you can't necessarily see in a basic science department. So I think that's the major advantage of having the two groups work side by side.
Thanks. JP?
Yeah, I'm JP Pepper. I know almost 100% of you. I came here almost exclusively for access to a patient population, really. So it was about facial palsy patients and seeing as many of them as I possibly could. So Stanford was, unique in terms of that opportunity. When you use that, if you have like a more rare disease, and then the scientific work that you may do surrounding that disease, then you can, kind of build expertise around it and do things that other places may be difficult. I think Stanford does depth really well. Like we've got just highly impactful clinical enterprises, research enterprises, etc. I think that the challenge for us, just to say something different, the challenge for us at otolaryngology is that our subspecialties are so different from one another. Cancer-focused research is really different than neuroepithelial research, etc. And so I think that's something that we all collectively work on, and I find really reassuring. But I think it's a persistent challenge. Like we even draw funding from very different sources. So that's something that kind of like always requires some effort and some fertilization to get over. The microscopy core, I think, is a great example of how like a super impactful, very powerful group can cross-pollinate other groups. So like you can do excellent microscopy, you know, whoever you are, as long as you're a Department of Otolaryngology member. And I think if we can take that and build that in other ways, not necessarily like even a benchtop tool, but even in other ways like statistical analysis or something like that, I think that will be to our benefit and then allow us to continue to, kind of make some progress that's very unique.
Did you want to say something?
Sure. I thought that I sent an email to everyone this morning, but I haven't. So I have to see what happened. But anyhow, I wanted to make everyone aware that there are 3 back-to-back papers published in Nature just a couple of days ago, co-led by Stanford physician scientists. And the papers have to do with the discovery and characterization of the extrachromosomal DNA and its role in malignant DNA, in malignancy progression. And they're remarkable because the 3 papers, the third one actually includes a clinical trial. So it goes back to what we are saying, that the Stanford environment is really set up in general, because one of these investigators is Howard Chang. He's in the Department of Dermatology. The other one is Paul Michaels in the Department of Pathology. And these are international collaborations. And the grant that they received internationally was 25 million pounds to do this kind of work. And our aspiration should be in that realm as well, where we are leading in areas that are relevant to our expertise and collaborating with people across the board. And along these lines, a recent example is actually Nate, who got this major ARPA Age grant that I think you all heard about because we advertise it everywhere. And it's a major collaborative grant. I think that was $45 million. That included, 16 PIs or 13?
It's 19 PIs.
19 PIs, and Nate is one of them. And this even got attention of the White House. It was in the press everywhere. But that doesn't matter. What matters is getting the work done. And because the work today requires large teams, like JP you are pointing, and everyone here is pointing to, its communication that we have to strengthen, and thinking really big in terms of what are the major unsolved problems. What can we do to stimulate others to join our team? Because otolaryngology is a relatively small field. And yet at Stanford, it's the most preeminent department at the School of Medicine. And it has been, regardless of the ranking. We have so many leaders in our department, and that is rare because in many other schools, across the nation and actually the world. Otolaryngology is a small appendix, typically of general surgery, doesn't get the attention we get, but here, what we say, the rest of the medical school pays attention to, and the rest of the nation. So we should also be thinking in those terms as we are trying to solve these big problems that you pointed out to microscopy. We all know that in every branch of otolaryngology, there are major unsolved problems. And being where we are and who we are and having the expertise that we have, we need to keep thinking about teaming up with the rest of the world, even outside of otolaryngology, to solve problems that are so critical to our field. Thank you.
Thanks. So I just, before switching directions, I just want to mention a couple of things. First, so I've worked in, I'd say, 4 other ENT departments through my career. I know at least all the hair cell scientists in the world, really, who are associated with clinical departments. And I think, you know, we're really the envy of every other department in ENT in terms of how research integrates with the clinical practice and translational work. I would say that, as Tina mentioned, I think that's true at Stanford as well. When I have, you know, friends and colleagues in neurology and psychology and anesthesiology and a variety of different clinical departments. And all of them are just amazed when I talk about how we work in the department. So, so this meeting is not really, oh, we have problems and how are we fixing things. This meeting is, we started here and now we're here, and how do we better take advantage of what we got? And how do we grow from here? What are the visions and pathways to keep what we have and to grow it and take it to the next level? And the other thing I would point out is, you know, we're talking research at the moment, but really this is, I think JP kind of alluded to this. Like, we have I don't know how many divisions. We had a lot of divisions, and as the work pulls everybody into their kind of niche, it's really important to make that effort to cross over. And to me, the reason for that is the science, the biology, does not follow division lines, right? The reason that the best, in my opinion, hearing research that happens in the country happens in clinical departments where there's a basic science component. And that's because as a biophysicist or cell physiologist, I can't address the basic questions by myself. We need genetics. We need molecular biologists. We need a breadth of people who are as good at what they do as I think I am at what I do, right? And I can't be good at everything. I'm not that smart. I can't be good at everything. And so we have to bring people together with a common cause. But, you know, look at how inflammatory responses, for example, are now everywhere. It underlies so many different, it's like neuroscience, right? You can stick neuro in front of everything, and then there's a neuro component to it. Well, now this is the same with immunology, right? This is, I mean, I was at a seminar last week that was on NK cells, and it had absolutely nothing to do with cancer. And the only time I ever heard about NK cells was from John before. And it's like there's overlap, and we need to, and we're a department that actually has the advantage of having people with strong backgrounds across so many different fields that we should be able to take advantage of those strengths. And the only way we can do that is if we actually know what everybody else is doing and what the skill sets are, and make it more common. That it's like, oh, I have this question, who can I ask, right? And it should be easier to find somebody within the department to talk to first. And they could, even if they can't answer the question, they would probably know who to ask. So that's really the basis of, for me anyway, of today's conversation. so I forget what next. So I guess if there's anybody that would like to talk about how they see, or either just big picture, how they see integrating to research to the clinic, or practically, if there are ideas around that you might have for that type of work, maybe we'll start there. Okay. Oh, hey, Julio, go talk.
So one of the things that we've been trying in our lab is to integrate people that don't necessarily have labs, but have the clinical expertise in certain matters. We're collaborating with Jennifer Lee, with Uche on imaging of parotid tumors and facial nerve. We're also collaborating with Fred Bake on imaging lymph nodes. So I think it's the whole idea is to create a bigger tent to be able to leverage all the parts of the department. I think, well, as someone that doesn't necessarily just do ear research, and I'm much more interested in the imaging component. Um, I think it's good to create new avenues of collaboration with within the department and new tents. I do feel what JP mentions, that having the imaging core has been a great asset. Maybe having stats would be another one, but we're our strength has always been inner ear research. But for those that don't necessarily do that much inner ear research, we need it's a little harder to break through and to create those paths. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is opening paths for other people in using what we know in imaging, not only collaborating with other non physician scientists, but also with Nate, for example. He's been collaborating in some of the new findings that we've had in lymph nodes. Um, so it's basically trying to expand the tent so everybody can participate.
Can I make just a quick comment about stats? We actually do have a statistician in the department, and some of you may have taken advantage of him, and others don't even know we have that. It's a great resource, and he's very responsive, and has a breadth and depth of expertise. And we have talked about potentially teaming up with quantitative data science, which is a division within internal medicine. But that would require a major contribution from the department on an annual basis to them to support them, and it's a major contribution. So we have had a discussion with our division chiefs. Are we ready to do that? Because we always have to think about how are we spending our resources. And right now we have not seen enough interest to actually justify such a major investment. But I'm open to suggestions. We need to know who needs what and on what kind of a basis. Because once we initiate this, we can't just drop out. And what we have heard from those who have used the quantitative data science unit, that it's variable. Sometimes it's just awesome because they really help you design a study. Let's say it's a clinical trial from scratch because they've seen your basic science data, they've seen all preclinical experiments, and now it's time to move it into a clinical trial. They consider power analysis, and they want to be a part of it from the very beginning. They don't consider themselves statisticians who you add after you've collected all data, and now you need to make sense of it. That also includes authorship on papers. They really consider themselves as equal to people who are at the bench or collecting data from the clinic. So some, based on the feedback I've received from some of you, found them very helpful, and others found that it was hit or miss, and it required a lot of nagging to get things done. So we have to think about an average user, and is this in the best interest of the department. But in the meantime, even our statistician in the department is majorly underutilized. I think Uche uses him a lot, and as you know, Uche publishes a lot of outcomes research with large statistical data sets, and there are a few others who use him a lot. And I think to begin with, we should start making more use of our existing statistician and then decide whether to branch into quantitative data science collaboration as well.
So why do they force you to do this, like you join us and you never leave?
No, it's not you never leave, but you have to join them for a couple of years, and it is a major investment because the model is that we pay them, but it's not a fee for service. At many other places, it's a fee for service. You specify what you need and you pay them, but there they say that they have the expertise of 40 different quantitative people. So they're not even in the department of data science, they're in the department of internal medicine. But they are statisticians and bioinformaticians with deep expertise in lots of things, from analyzing RNA-seq data to proteomics to clinical trial design. So they
But I'm
say,
just thinking of it as like a business model, so this is a better way to support their operation.
yes, because they say then you can tap into all 40 of them depending on your needs. So you get a consultation and then they adjust their team and have you work with them. So you're not paying one individual, but indeed that's how they are funded.
And
You
it's
can
not
do
a
like
pay by
single
hour.
cell and clinical trial, different statistical expertise, yeah.
But it's not a
Well,
pay
there's
by
enough
hour.
people doing single cell analysis, right?
Well, it depends what people need, right? It's not a pay by hour. So it's like you pay this fee and it, if one person uses it, then it's a lot of money per hour. And if a lot of people use it, then it's less, right? So we need to see that people are gonna engage and take advantage of it, to make it worth the investment in doing it, right? Because if the money goes there, it doesn't go someplace else. It's only
Exactly.
so much money, so.
Exactly. There are some departments that rely on them, and there are other departments that try them and pulled out, and there are others that never use them. Because I spoke to all chairs, department chairs as well, in terms of do you use them and what do you find them helpful for. So because every department runs differently.
And have they used it mostly for like large grants, like a U grant, or?
It's highly variable because you can use them for anything you want. So others use them for large grants. There are people who use them for their R grants, but then again, they are involved from the beginning. They're involved from the design of the study for an R grant. If you contact them when you're halfway through, they say that's not for us. And this is a uniquely Stanford approach. Because we've asked, does this exist anywhere else? And it doesn't, because everywhere else it's fee for service, or you have a statistician you work with, but this is different, and Stanford as an institution was even questioning whether it would survive, but it's thriving, clearly.
What departments have stuck with them for many years?
Well, it was housed in the Department of, and it still is, Internal Medicine, and it was actually initiated by Bob Harrington, who since left to become Dean of Cornell, because he wanted to have statisticians in his department, and his department is the largest at the School of Medicine. I think they have 400 faculty. So each of their divisions is bigger than our department. So, for example, their division of oncology is bigger than our department. Their division of infectious disease, I believe, is bigger. But anyhow, so they have different needs. And they needed a lot of statisticians. And by the way, they have more university tenure line investigators, full-time PhDs in their department than the rest of the School of Medicine combined. So they're a huge operation, and they said, we can't get enough, we can't get attention from data science because they're too swamped with their things. So we have to do our own thing. But in the meantime, they said, we have now built this expertise and we want to offer it to other departments. Departments that use it include neurology and neurosurgery to a degree because they have a combined clinical core. pediatrics uses them as well.
Mhm.
But, actually that's all that I know.
It's pretty useful. I mean, I think depending on the area you're studying in, I mean, some papers and some grants expect you to know, right, there's a data management section and they obviously ask for power analysis. I remember I had the animal protocol that I usually just put 1,000 mice every year, and then as the lab grows, I have to put more mice. And then they wouldn't approve it 1 year. They said, what was your power analysis to justify this number of animals? And I was like, this is how I've always done it. And they were like, well, why don't you come to talk to one of our statisticians that works with the animal facility? I was like, what do you mean you have this?
Yeah,
And the guy taught me how to, well, this is how you should analyze how many animals you should be using each year. So I was like, okay, well, great. I'm going to include you in my papers from now on because this is actually quite useful. Right.
I mean, I wonder if it would be, just as a practical idea, to have a repository or something that says, like, what are the needs? What do people see as what they need to help their science move? And also one that says, this is what we have within the department, and potentially what is available at Stanford at some level that we could buy into or whatever, either at individual or at the department level, something like that. Just to make it a little bit easier to, when we're having a division chiefs meeting, for example, that would be something we could talk about. Have we got to a point where this is really a need across divisions that we should think about? Do we buy in to another department, or do we build something within the department to do? Because I mean, there are practical sides to all of these things, right? I mean, I didn't even realize we had a statistician within the department.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best kept secrets. Everyone can tap into him. I didn't know that. I discovered it this year, but he was very responsive. It was in real time, responses in real time, and really what we needed. I wish Uche could be here because he has used him the most, and I think just the fact that he keeps. You are here, I know.
Is it Ife? Is it Ife?
Yes.
Ife Ma, right?
Yes,
Is
Ife Ma.
the statistician. Okay.
Yeah,
Have you used him?
I work with him. He's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very helpful for when you're submitting proposals.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Well, there you
Kara says she has worked with the QSU before because there's some funding through MCHRI to support that, and she said one positive and one negative experience.
Yeah. I think it would also, doing something like that, just kind of, so we have a temperature of where the department is broadly in terms of needs and resources, so that we use what we have best. The core facility is another good example, right? There's a lot of imaging tools in the core facility that are generic in terms of what you put under the microscope to look at, right? And there's also a lot of audio measuring auditory function, vestibular function, there's behavioral resources, and we're always talking about what do we need or where should we go. And I do think the core has the capacity to grow across divisions more intentionally. So it grew, in my opinion, when I got here, I thought there was a strong cancer research side, and we were kind of growing the auditory side. There's always been, so in my mind, there's always been a strong cancer group. I think John obviously came into that area. So, if there are needs technically across, that's something we should also kind of be aware of and think about how we can make the core accessible again across divisions. And if there are tools or resources that we need there, how do we work to generate that, right? I mean, most of what's in the core has come either through writing equipment grants It started with Stefan and I putting, a chunk of our startup dollars into creating a core. And it comes from a lot through philanthropic resources. And it comes from the department. I mean, the department has kind of picked up whatever the cost was that we couldn't quite reach, basically. So, if the PIs say, well, we need this, we have a microscope coming in January, right? As an example, and the PIs have covered about a third, and the Citrel, which is philanthropic money, has kind of covered about a third, and the department has covered the rest, right? And we don't make announcements about all these things, but that's just the reality of how do you get a tool. And so, working out how to build philanthropic resources across divisions, I think, is also really important. And to me, the core is something, it's like the water cooler to me. It's like people talk about their science and they learn how, through the technology, how to get at the biology. And that builds crosstalk across projects. So I think that would be something to think about. And it might start by just knowing what everybody needs. Like, I have no idea what Nate and John need on a day-to-day basis to do their labs, and how much can be outsourced into a core type thing, and how much they need internally, and that's any of that. And I'm not, I'm doing a bunch of things just like everybody else. So we need a way to bring that information, make it easy access so that we can have conversations around it, I would say.
Tony, I'd like to bring your question that got crickets at the other grand rounds that you gave back to the table. How do we bridge that gap between the basic science and clinical side? Well, I'd say, looking at it from a residency program perspective, it's a very high bar for our residents to participate with you guys on a basic science level, except for the CSTB residents, right? That's a different beast. But translational projects, I think, could be a great bridge between research side and clinical side, where we can involve the residents as the conduit. Because we as clinicians, and me personally at least, I won't speak for everybody, but I'm so clinically busy and busy with other stuff, I don't have time to think about these things. And if you guys have a great idea that you want and need to get to the clinical side, if you let, I don't know, maybe I'm the repository of, or conduit, and you say, I have these projects, you guys tell me that you have these projects. Every year we have 5 residents going into their 3rd year where they have, dedicated research time where they could actually do something like that, or get a project like that started. That's not quite such a high barrier as like, oh, I can't go into the lab for 3 months and do experiments.
Yeah, so first two parts, I would say. I agree that maybe we could have a centralized place where we have a list of ongoing projects, and we say, which of these can or can't be incorporate a resident for their research time.
So I guarantee you at least a couple of them each year are looking for projects at the beginning of the 3rd year.
And I mean, I've had residents throughout the time. The key, in my mind, I guess I disagree that, it's this huge high bar. All it takes is planning, in my mind. So if you walk into the lab at the start of your research time with no prep into what you're going to do or anything like that, then you have no chance. But when your research time is coming. And if you have an interest and you talk to somebody, you can carve out a project. And I would say, of the people doing basic research, technically probably the stuff that I do is some of the hardest technically to do. And I have absolutely no qualms about bringing residents in on any project. We talk about what the skill sets are, we talk about what the interests are, and we design a project. But we typically do that a year in advance, whenever the time, I don't sleep much, so I can match with residents and whatnot. And you just talk about what that can be. And you can carve something out. So I think the idea that, oh, it's a really high bar, I think that's really, it's easy to get over. It doesn't have to be a really high bar.
But Kwang, just to clarify, when you say you have residents looking for projects, you mean in a basic science lab, or you mean rather they're looking for something that's more clinically oriented?
Well, I mean, there's going to be a spectrum of what they might be looking for, but I think what I was thinking was that a clinically oriented project with you guys would be an easier pathway to get them involved in the research.
And I would say that all of us have some translational work going on.
Yeah. I would just add to that.
Patrick?
Oh, okay, Patrick.
I guess speak from the resident perspective, I think that's a really great thing for It is really, I agree, a high bar for residents to get involved even in translational work during clinical years. And planning definitely helps, but it can be really hard when the year before our dedicated research time is our consult year, and that's some of our busiest time. And we are able to do some planning in there, but I think that's part of like inherently why it's challenging for many residents to get involved. But I do think, and I thank you for bringing this up, that residents provide a really meaningful clinical perspective to helping to create those types of translational projects that, you know, we see things all the time during our training that hopefully inform, you know, new ideas, new projects, and we can see different ways to plug it into existing research. I feel like that's something I was able to do with Dr. Dorenzo and her work, and I think that a lot of other residents could benefit from that as well. So hopefully we can help make those opportunities happen even more. But it's still very hard.
When I was saying planning, I don't think it takes a huge number of hours. And I know residents are, you know, they need as many hours just to sleep as they can find. But it's really just where are your interests? And maybe having a registry of projects would say, okay, I'm kind of interested in these couple of things. And then it's kind of a couple of conversations. It's not really the load of design and implementing isn't necessarily on the resident. What it's really, what I need is to know where your interests are and what's the type of work you're interested in trying to do. I mean, I've had people come in the lab and, you know, record from single cells because they had a background in that. And they were just like, I want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, how the hell are you going to do this? And they were like, I'm doing this. And they came in and they did it. I mean, it was so, and I've had people come and learn, you know, work on different surgical approaches and help develop how access to the ear and things like that. So, and, you know, we have a spectrum of tools, and it's really a matter of what are you interested in doing, right? That I need to know in order to design something. And I think we all recognize the time commitments that everybody has. And so it's, you know, what I'm trying to say is I think in everyone's mind, it's a really high bar to access the basic science tools. And I don't think it should be. I think it can be easier than you think to get at it.
Maybe if I could just like add one other, I think for me, one of the things I'm always curious about is like, how does the incentive system work for the residents? Like if in our labs, like, you know, I assume most people don't want to come in and do they're not going to come in and do a 5-year mouse project, but there are things that would be really beneficial from the residents. And I wonder, like, do you all need to be like first author on 3 papers, or would you be open to being the clinical side of a manuscript that has a lot of authors on it? Maybe that means you're second or a co-first or something like that. And how I mean, I guess I don't have a great sense of what you all need for your careers and how best we could help, you know, everybody be successful from the work that we do. So maybe that's more as an open question. But,
I think in general, it's helpful for their careers, to get a first authorship and,
Yeah.
and a number of different papers when they're applying for fellowship and they're looking at faculty positions later on. And that's why, another reason why clinical projects are much more attractive, because you can maybe crank out 3 or 4 pretty quickly while, you're on service and not, and still be able to get those done. But, impact-wise, I think, something basic science or translational is much more impactful, probably, than chart review, right?
yeah.
I think as you describe it, that sounds great. Like, I think on service writing clinical papers is important because it's showing, one, the work is important, and two, it's showing kind of the academic side of what you're doing, that you're more than simply doing procedures and whatnot, right? That you're actively engaged in understanding outcomes. But I think that if we have there's a research time allotted, that you should really think about using it for something different. And it's not better or worse, I'm not trying to say that, but it's definitely different to be involved in a translational research project and getting your hands wet or dirty and understanding a little bit of the scientific approach and what goes on in a lab. And yeah, I think the likelihood that you're going to get a first author paper out of a couple of months in a basic science lab is really low. But you are going to get, probably multiple presentations and things like that out of it. And you will, and all things go well, you're going to be on a paper. If things are organized well, you're going to contribute, a figure or two to a larger body of work. And I would, at least I'm very biased, obviously, but I like to know that I would see authorship on a paper that's translational as an indication that this is really who you are, right? That you are interested in academic science as a clinician. To me, I think that makes you stand out at whatever next step you're going to. And that's not, and not every, if you're not interested in an academic position, then it's less important, and that's fine. You shouldn't do it, right? It's for the presidents that are really interested in this career path, then they should take advantage of the fact that they're here and that there are opportunities to do it. That's, I think, right? It's not a better or worse situation. It's take advantage of what is here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the, I totally agree. I think in trying to get papers for practical purposes is very important. But I think one of the intangible obligations as faculty is to role model what academic otolaryngology looks like. Right? And sometimes that doesn't amount to a paper or something like that. And in the lab, one of the most morale-building things is it's not going out to Topgolf or going to lunch and things like that. The thing that builds morale the most is when somebody in the lab gets a paper. When somebody gets a paper, it motivates everyone in the lab to work it's like, oh, I see this is really rewarding. Let's everyone starts working a lot harder. And so one of the things I think in a clinical department with basic scientists that could be very motivating is if a paper comes out where it involves clinicians and basic scientists on some kind of joint thing, and it comes out. I think that would be very motivating and a great role model for the trainees and what academic otolaryngology looks like. Because we're, if you think about it, I heard Lloyd Miner talk about this. We're trained from the very beginning to just think about ourselves, right? You have to get the best grades in college to get into medical school, best grades in medical school to get into otolaryngology, best grades to get into fellowship, or best performance to get into fellowship, and then it's assistant professor, thinking about tenure, thinking about, promotion, and all of a sudden, you're 50 years old and you've only been thinking about yourself. Right? So we're not trained to think as a group. Whereas people in business school, from day one, they're thinking about how do they get to a goal or get to an end product. And I think we should try to think about that more. How do we each have to think about our own tenure trajectory, but how do we think about doing something together that really models what it could look like? I think that would be very inspiring, even more than just getting individual papers. I think it would be very inspiring.
It sounds like we should have a registry of updated projects. Would that be, or even clinical projects and basic projects?
Yeah, I think if there's projects that you think are accessible,
Yeah, I mean,
for resident
I
participation,
certainly like
I think
that.
that would be really great.
CSTP, right? So
And even medical students too. We have
And
medical
medical
students
students,
looking
yeah.
too that I talk to as well. So
Kara and I made a registry for the PEDS division for all the projects.
Yeah.
I think hopefully the residents got that, yeah. That's just a way to say, here are things that are going on, if you're interested in working with anyone, reach out to us.
I think in the fall, we have a research day where maybe a third or a fourth of all the faculty present, and it seems like it's been mostly about letting everyone know what types of stuff you're working on. But I think the presentations are short and they are pretty broad. I wonder if we could use that time, maybe you can use a minute or two at the end, if you happen to have some sub-projects that could lend themselves for resident involvement. Maybe you could have a slide that lists that. That way the interns and the second years, they can start to think about things before next year. Because the registry, I think it might be hard to keep it up to date. Also, and stuff always comes up, and you have to remove the old stuff, add the new stuff, and so on.
good idea.
Okay. Well, I think we're running out of time, so feel free to send me a note if anybody has ideas or other thoughts on what we've talked about today. I'm open for discussions and trying out new ways to work together, lower that barrier. Thanks.
Thanks.